Introduction to Hollywood's Golden Age, expanded version. Origins of Hollywood. The origins of Hollywood as the center of the American film industry is a fascinating story that combines innovation, geography, and a bit of luck. At the dawn of the 20th century, the movie business was fragmented and scattered, primarily along the East Coast in places like New York City and New Jersey. This was where the earliest studios emerged, where inventors like Thomas Edison held patents that controlled much of the film technology. The Motion Picture Patents Company, founded by Edison in 1908, sought to monopolize the industry by controlling patents on film cameras and projectors, creating legal and financial barriers for independent filmmakers. As a result, many filmmakers began looking for ways to escape this monopoly and found themselves heading west to Southern California. Hollywood was then a small, relatively undeveloped community with an ideal climate for year-round filming. The combination of consistent sunshine, varied landscapes, including beaches, mountains, and deserts, and affordable land made it a perfect location for filmmakers to create diverse scenes without leaving the area. Another factor was distance. Being far away from the East Coast gave filmmakers freedom to experiment without immediate legal pressure from Edison's trust. Additionally, California's rapidly growing population and infrastructure provided a ready audience and resources. By the early 1910s, key figures like D.W. Griffith, Cecil B. DeMille, and Thomas Ince had set up studios in Hollywood. Griffith's 1915 epic The Birth of a Nation was a landmark film in both technical achievement and narrative storytelling, albeit a deeply controversial one due to its racist content. It proved that movies could be serious art and influential cultural forces. During this formative period, Hollywood began to develop its reputation not only as a place for movie production, but also as a glamorous destination for actors, directors, and dreamers seeking fame. The foundations of the star system, studio system, and genre conventions began to take shape in these early years, setting the stage for the Golden Age. Early silent films. Silent films are the earliest narrative forms of cinema, predating sound films by over a decade. These films, typically black and white and without synchronized dialogue, relied on visual storytelling techniques that demanded creativity and innovation from filmmakers and actors alike. The first films were often short, simple scenes or actualities capturing everyday life, such as workers leaving a factory or a train arriving at a station. However, the art of storytelling through film quickly evolved. Filmmakers began experimenting with narrative structure, editing, and camera techniques to engage audiences emotionally. One of the most significant innovations was the use of intertitles, text cards inserted between scenes to convey dialogue or explain plot points. Because these films had no synchronized sound, actors had to communicate meaning through exaggerated body language and facial expressions. This heightened acting style became a hallmark of silent cinema. Silent films also relied heavily on live musical accompaniment during screenings. Pianists, organists, or even orchestras performed scores that enhanced the mood, added tension, and helped audiences connect emotionally with the story. By the 1910s and 1920s, silent films had become a major form of entertainment. Genres such as comedy, melodrama, adventure, and romance flourished. Stars like Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford became household names worldwide. Chaplin's iconic Little Tramp character, with his mix of humor and pathos, demonstrated the power of silent storytelling to resonate deeply with audiences. Hollywood's early silent films laid the groundwork for cinematic language, showing how visual images could tell complex and compelling stories without spoken words. These innovations would influence generations of filmmakers, even after sound became standard. Rise of movie studios. The rapid growth of the film industry in the 1910s and 1920s led to the establishment of powerful movie studios that would dominate Hollywood for decades. This period saw the rise of the studio system, where major companies controlled not only film production but also distribution and exhibition. The biggest studios, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, 20th Century Fox, and Universal, built vast lots with sound stages, editing rooms, and elaborate sets. These studios functioned like factories, producing numerous films each year to meet the voracious appetite of audiences. This system allowed for efficiency and consistency. Studios had departments dedicated to screenwriting, costume design, makeup, and special effects. Directors and actors were often under long-term contracts, allowing studios to control their schedules and public images. One notable feature of the studio system was the star system. Studios promoted certain actors as stars, cultivating their public personas through fan magazines, publicity events, and controlled appearances. Stars like Clark Gable, Bette Davis, and Humphrey Bogart became box office draws whose names guaranteed audience interest. The rise of studios also involved vertical integration. Studios owned theater chains, ensuring their films were shown exclusively. This business model helped maximize profits and created a competitive environment that pushed studios to innovate both artistically and commercially. Despite criticism of its control and rigidity, the studio system was central to Hollywood's golden age, enabling the production of films that ranged from intimate dramas to lavish musicals, all with the backing of powerful business infrastructure. Transition to sound films. The late 1920s marked one of the most significant technological revolutions in cinema, the introduction of sound. Prior to this, films were silent with live music accompaniment, but the arrival of talkies transformed the industry entirely. The breakthrough came with The Jazz Singer, 1927, produced by Warner Brothers, which featured synchronized dialogue and songs using the Vitaphone sound-on-disc system. Its immense popularity demonstrated the commercial potential of sound films, and soon all major studios rushed to equip themselves with sound technology. The transition was far from easy. Studios had to invest heavily in new sound stages, recording equipment, and theaters had to install sound systems. Directors and actors had to adapt quickly. Silent film stars with heavy accents or unsuitable voices found it difficult to make the transition, leading to career endings for some. The storytelling style also shifted. Dialogue-driven scripts replaced title cards, and filmmakers explored new genres like musicals and gangster films that leveraged sound's dramatic possibilities. The introduction of sound films changed not only technical aspects but also the way stories were told, making cinema more immersive and accessible. Despite initial challenges, sound became the norm by the early 1930s, paving the way for the Golden Age's artistic flourishing. The studio system and its power. Major studios overview. In the Golden Age of Hollywood, the landscape of the American film industry was dominated by a small group of powerful and influential studios, known collectively as the Big Five and the Little Three. These studios didn't just produce films, they controlled nearly every aspect of their creation, distribution, and exhibition. The Big Five included MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, and RKO Pictures. Each of these studios owned their own theaters, which allowed them to guarantee screen time for their films. MGM was known for its lavish musicals and star-studded productions, a studio of glamour that represented the pinnacle of studio system opulence. Paramount, meanwhile, boasted sophistication and prestige, with directors like Ernst Lubitsch and actors like Marlene Dietrich bringing an air of European artistry. Warner Brothers had a gritty, streetwise style with gangster films and social dramas. Think Little Caesar and The Public Enemy. 20th Century Fox brought innovation and spectacle, especially with stars like Shirley Temple and later Marilyn Monroe. RKO, though smaller, contributed enormously through films like King Kong and the works of Orson Welles and Fred Astaire. The Little Three, Universal, Columbia, and United Artists, did not own as many theaters and were considered minor only in terms of vertical integration. Columbia specialized in lower-budget but profitable productions and nurtured talent like Frank Capra. Universal focused on horror classics like Dracula and Frankenstein. United Artists, founded by legends like Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford, allowed for greater creative independence. Together, these studios formed the backbone of Hollywood's power. They built backlots that mimicked entire cities, controlled armies of craftsmen and artists, and managed a pipeline that turned out movie after movie. Their names became synonymous with quality and consistency, and through strict hierarchies and control systems, they shaped not just film but the very image of American culture around the world. The contract system. The contract system was at the heart of how the studios maintained control over their stars and workers. From actors and directors to costume designers and cinematographers, virtually everyone involved in film production was employed on long-term contracts, usually lasting 7 years. These contracts gave the studios immense authority over their employees' lives and careers. Under this system, stars were assigned films rather than choosing their own projects. Refusing a role could lead to suspension, during which time the studio would stop paying the actor and freeze their contract, effectively extending the total time they were bound. This led to cases where actors worked for a decade under a 7-year agreement. Studios also had the right to change an actor's name, alter their appearance, and craft a completely new public persona. Lucille Lesueur became Joan Crawford. Norma Jean Mortensen became Marilyn Monroe. The studio's publicity machines trained actors in everything from elocution and dance to personal conduct, ensuring they fit into the polished image required by their brand. Though it sounds draconian, the contract system also offered stability and a clear path to stardom for many. Aspiring actors who were discovered by a studio could be groomed, promoted, and placed in major productions with an efficiency rarely seen in the modern entertainment industry. But it was the studio that decided who rose and who fell. The system began to falter in the 1940s as stars like Bette Davis and Olivia de Havilland challenged it in court, seeking creative freedom. These challenges would later help break the studio's grip, but during the height of the Golden Age, the contract system was law. Control over stars and production. Hollywood studio bosses were like monarchs of miniature kingdoms. They wielded almost absolute authority over both the stars and the films themselves. Everything, scripts, costumes, casting, locations, was tightly managed to ensure efficiency, profitability, and adherence to the studio's vision. Stars were not just actors. They were products. Their personal lives were choreographed to match their on-screen images. Marriages were arranged for publicity. Scandals were suppressed or spun by press agents. Studios would go to extreme lengths to maintain the illusion of a clean and glamorous Hollywood. If a star became a liability, they could be loaned to another studio or benched indefinitely. Directors, too, often found themselves bound by the studio's control. Only a few auteurs, like Alfred Hitchcock or John Ford, had enough clout to push back. Most directors worked within tight guidelines and had little say in casting or final cuts. Producers acted as the true creative leaders, ensuring films stayed on schedule, on budget, and on brand. Writers, often working in teams, churned out scripts in vast office buildings, working under the same conditions as any corporate employee. There was little room for artistic deviation. Films were seen as factory products, not artistic statements. This centralized control helped create the signature look of each studio. A Warner Brothers film felt different from an MGM film. A Paramount comedy differed from a Columbia drama. But behind this variety was a singular truth. The studio called every shot. The role of producers and directors. In the Golden Age, producers were arguably more powerful than directors. They were the linchpins who balanced the creative with the commercial. From story development to casting, budget approval to post-production, producers oversaw every phase of the process. At MGM, producer Irving Thalberg was hailed as a genius, someone who could blend artistry with mass appeal. He didn't direct a single film, but his influence was seen in every MGM production during his reign. His producer's system became a model for others. Pre-production planning was meticulous, with every detail considered before filming even began. Directors were often assigned rather than chosen. They were expected to deliver a competent film on time, and their creative input was limited unless they had proven box office power. Some directors accepted this limitation, focusing on craftsmanship over vision. Others, like Howard Hawks or Michael Curtiz, found ways to assert their voices within the system. Still, a few broke the mold entirely. Frank Capra at Columbia and John Ford at Fox managed to develop distinctive styles. Orson Welles, with Citizen Kane, famously challenged the norms, although he suffered career setbacks because of it. In this era, directing was a job. Producing was power. Vertical integration explained. Vertical integration refers to the studio's control over every aspect of a film's life cycle, production, distribution, and exhibition. During Hollywood's Golden Age, this structure allowed studios to operate like self-contained empires. They made the movies, distributed them through their own channels, and showed them in their own theaters. This system ensured maximum profit and minimal risk. A studio could guarantee that its films would be seen, bypassing the need to compete for theater space. They could package films together. If a theater wanted the next big hit, they had to agree to show a few lesser-known titles too. This practice, called block booking, kept revenue flowing. It also gave studios power over independent theaters, forcing them to accept unfavorable terms just to get access to the most popular movies. Smaller studios and independent filmmakers found it nearly impossible to compete. The US government eventually stepped in, leading to the 1948 Supreme Court case United States versus Paramount Pictures Incorporated. The ruling declared vertical integration unconstitutional, effectively ending studio ownership of theaters. It marked the beginning of the end for the traditional studio system. But during the Golden Age, vertical integration helped create a stable, profitable environment where Hollywood could flourish. It was both a business strategy and a system of creative control. The studio system and its power. The Star Factory model. The Hollywood studio system operated like a finely tuned machine, and nowhere was this more evident than in the Star Factory model. Studios didn't just find stars, they manufactured them. This assembly line approach to stardom took unknown actors and turned them into household names, with every detail of their public and private personas meticulously crafted for audience appeal. Once an aspiring actor was signed, the studio would often change their name to something more glamorous or marketable. Archibald Leach became Cary Grant. Frances Gumm became Judy Garland. These weren't just name changes, they were identity overhauls. Physical appearances were also altered. Teeth were fixed, noses were reshaped, waistlines were slimmed. Studios even managed everything from wardrobe to mannerisms. The actor would be trained in dance, singing, diction, and etiquette. Public appearances were staged. Magazine articles were ghostwritten. Personal scandals were covered up or respun. Romantic relationships were either encouraged or discouraged based on publicity value. A gay actor might be linked with a female co-star to preserve a straight image. The goal was to create idealized versions of masculinity and femininity that audiences could admire and emulate. Stars were aspirational figures, larger than life, morally upright, endlessly charming. The studios knew how to sell dreams, and stars were the packaging. This model also created long-term audience loyalty. Fans would flock to a film just because it starred someone they adored. That loyalty translated into guaranteed box office returns, making stars the most valuable asset in the Hollywood economy. But behind the smiles and spotlights, many stars struggled with the pressure to maintain an artificial image, leading to personal breakdowns and tragic endings. The Star Factory was brilliant, but it could be brutal. Censorship and the Hays Code. From the early 1930s to the late 1960s, Hollywood films were subject to a strict set of moral guidelines known as the Motion Picture Production Code, or the Hays Code, named after Will H. Hays, the first president of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, MPPDA. The code was implemented to clean up Hollywood's image after a series of high-profile scandals in the 1920s. Studios feared government regulation, so they opted for self-censorship instead. The Hays Code dictated what could and could not be shown on screen. It prohibited profanity, suggestive nudity, graphic violence, drug use, and anything that might lower moral standards. Crime could not pay. Adultery could not be portrayed in a positive light. Homosexuality was forbidden, as was miscegenation, interracial relationships. The code also encouraged films to uphold the sanctity of marriage, law, and religion. Even things like how a kiss was filmed were regulated, known as the 3-second rule. Kisses couldn't be too long or passionate. Studios submitted their scripts to the Production Code Administration for approval. If a film didn't get the seal of approval, many theaters wouldn't show it, severely limiting its earning potential. As a result, writers and directors became masters of suggestion. They learned to imply rather than show, to use metaphors and shadows to get past the censors. While the Hays Code undoubtedly stifled certain stories and voices, it also led to some of the most creative and subtle storytelling in film history. Directors like Alfred Hitchcock and Billy Wilder found ways to hint at forbidden subjects with clever dialogue and innuendo. Eventually, changing social attitudes, and the rise of independent cinema led to the code's decline. It was officially abandoned in 1968, replaced by the MPAA rating system we use today. Impact on film content. The tight control exerted by studios, combined with the constraints of the Hays Code, significantly shaped the kind of stories Hollywood told during the Golden Age. Content was carefully curated to appeal to mass audiences while avoiding controversy. This often meant reinforcing traditional American values: heroism, patriotism, romantic love, and justice. Genres flourished under this guidance. Musicals celebrated optimism and unity. Westerns upheld rugged individualism. Film noir, despite its shadowy atmosphere, still ended with crime punished and order restored. Romance films idealized love, and war films glorified sacrifice for country. At the same time, certain topics were simply off-limits. Racism, police brutality, sexuality, and mental illness were rarely portrayed in honest or complex ways. Minority characters were often sidelined or reduced to stereotypes. Women's roles were largely confined to the love interest, the femme fatale, or the domestic figure. However, within these boundaries, filmmakers found ways to innovate. Comedies poked fun at authority and social norms. Science fiction and horror served as allegories for real-world anxieties, like nuclear war or political oppression. Some dramas subtly critiqued wealth disparity, gender roles, or the emptiness of fame. Ironically, the restrictions may have sharpened filmmakers' storytelling skills. Unable to rely on shock or explicitness, they focused on character, mood, and dialogue. The result was a golden age of subtle, layered, and enduring cinema that continues to influence modern filmmakers. The role of agents and managers. While studios controlled much of a star's professional life, a parallel system began to emerge during the Golden Age, one that offered actors and filmmakers a bit of leverage: talent agents and managers. Agents acted as middlemen between the studios and the stars. They negotiated contracts, lobbied for better roles, and tried to ensure their clients were treated fairly. Early agents like Lew Wasserman of MCA, Music Corporation of America, revolutionized the industry by negotiating profit participation for stars instead of flat salaries, a move that would eventually shift power away from the studios. Managers, on the other hand, handled the day-to-day personal and professional lives of the talent. They offered career advice, helped with image management, and often played a more personal role. In many cases, the line between agent and manager blurred, but both were critical in helping stars navigate the complicated world of studio politics. As more stars became household names, their agents gained influence. Some agents began packaging talent, offering a star, director, and script as a bundle deal to studios, thereby gaining enormous negotiating power. This shift marked the early cracks in the studio system's dominance. Once an actor could walk away from a studio and still get work, the old model began to unravel. The decline of the studio system. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, the mighty studio system began to falter. Several key factors contributed to its decline, fundamentally changing the way Hollywood operated. First came the 1948 Supreme Court decision in United States versus Paramount Pictures Incorporated, which ruled that studios could no longer own their own theaters. This broke the back of vertical integration and forced the studios to divest their exhibition arms. Without guaranteed screens for their films, studios faced real competition for the first time. Second, the rise of television offered a new form of entertainment that was cheap, accessible, and right in the living room. Audiences began to dwindle at movie theaters, and box office revenues declined. Studios struggled to adapt, initially dismissing TV as a passing fad. Third, the cultural shifts of the 1950s and 60s made the old formulas seem outdated. Younger audiences wanted more realism, more grit, and stories that reflected their changing values. The Hays Code, once a shield, became a shackle. Independent producers and foreign films began to offer what the studios couldn't. Finally, the very stars the studios had created began to demand independence. With powerful agents negotiating better deals and legal challenges undermining the contract system, studios could no longer control their talent in the same way. The star system turned against its creators. By the 1960s, the classic studio model had all but collapsed. New Hollywood would rise from its ashes, ushering in an era of director-driven cinema. But the legacy of the studio system, its structure, its stars, and its storytelling techniques would never truly disappear. Even today, echoes of that golden machinery still resonate in how films are made and marketed. Iconic film genres of the era. Musicals and their popularity. During Hollywood's golden age, musicals were more than just a film genre. They were a cultural celebration of optimism, spectacle, and fantasy. With synchronized sound becoming widely available in the late 1920s, musicals quickly evolved into a major box office draw, enchanting audiences with catchy tunes, vibrant dance numbers, and stories brimming with hope. Studios like MGM became the undisputed leaders of this genre, creating lavish productions that showcased the talents of choreographers, composers, costume designers, and performers alike. Directors such as Vincent Minnelli and Busby Berkeley revolutionized the genre. Berkeley's use of synchronized dancing and kaleidoscopic visuals turned musical numbers into mesmerizing spectacles. Minnelli brought an elegance and emotional depth that elevated the musical from mere entertainment to cinematic artistry. Stars like Judy Garland, Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, and Debbie Reynolds became icons, not only for their acting but for their dancing and singing skills. Garland's performance in The Wizard of Oz, 1939, remains legendary, while Kelly's athletic grace in St. in the Rain, 1952, redefined what choreography could look like on screen. Musicals often served as escapism, particularly during the Great Depression and World War II. At a time when Americans faced widespread hardship, these films offered joyful fantasies, where characters burst into song and dance to express love, ambition, or triumph. Audiences left the theaters humming memorable melodies, feeling a bit lighter and a bit more hopeful. The popularity of the genre also influenced fashion, music, and stage productions. Broadway and Hollywood fed each other creatively, turning popular stage hits into successful films and vice versa. Musicals not only dominated the golden age, they helped define it. Film noir's dark themes. If musicals represented the dreams of Hollywood's golden age, film noir captured its nightmares. Emerging in the 1940s and peaking in the late 50s, film noir, a French term meaning black film, was a genre steeped in shadows, cynicism, and moral ambiguity. Rooted in German expressionism and shaped by the trauma of World War II, film noir reflected a more pessimistic view of American life. The films were characterized by hard-boiled detectives, dangerous women, corrupt institutions, and existential despair. They explored themes of betrayal, identity, fatalism, and the thin line between good and evil. Visually, noirs used high-contrast lighting, deep shadows, rain-soaked streets, and smoke-filled rooms. These stylistic choices weren't just aesthetic, they reflected the characters' inner turmoil. Films like Double Indemnity, 1944, The Maltese Falcon, 1941, Out of the Past, 1947, and The Big Sleep, 1946, exemplified the genre, with tightly written scripts, tense atmospheres, and unforgettable dialogue. The genre also introduced the femme fatale, a seductive, independent woman whose ambitions or desires often led to the downfall of the male protagonist. These characters challenged traditional gender roles, even as the narratives often punished them for their autonomy. Film noir was more than a style. It was a mirror reflecting America's post-war disillusionment, its anxieties about crime, corruption, and shifting social norms. Though many of these films were low-budget B-pictures, their artistic depth and emotional complexity gave them lasting power. Today, noir remains one of the most influential genres in cinematic history. Westerns and American identity. No genre is more uniquely American than the Western. During the Golden Age, Westerns dominated movie screens and played a central role in mythologizing American history, values, and identity. Set against sweeping landscapes, Westerns told tales of rugged individualism, frontier justice, and the taming of the wild. Heroes wore hats and carried pistols. They were lawmen, outlaws, ranchers, or loners seeking justice in a lawless land. These stories weren't just about shootouts. They were about order versus chaos, civilization versus wilderness, and sometimes, progress versus tradition. John Ford's Stagecoach, 1939, helped establish the genre's cinematic grammar, while The Searchers, 1956, pushed its emotional and thematic boundaries. Stars like John Wayne, Gary Cooper, and Henry Fonda embodied the stoic cowboy hero, gritty, moral, and physically commanding. Western towns, horseback chases, saloons, and showdowns became instantly recognizable tropes. But within this familiar setting, filmmakers explored complex themes, racial tension, vengeance, redemption, and national identity. Some westerns leaned into nostalgia, while others offered biting critiques of American expansionism and its costs, especially to Native American populations. The genre also adapted well to changing times. During the Cold War, westerns often became metaphors for ideological battles. The black and white morality of early westerns gave way to more morally ambiguous stories in the 1950s, foreshadowing the anti-hero era to come. In defining the mythology of America, the western also revealed its contradictions. It's no wonder that it endured for decades and still influences storytelling today. Iconic film genres of the era continued. Comedies and screwball humor. During the golden age of Hollywood, comedy evolved into a cinematic powerhouse, offering both relief from the harsh realities of life and a platform for sharp social commentary. Among its many subgenres, screwball comedy emerged as a standout, an energetic blend of wit, absurdity, and romantic tension that defined an entire era of filmmaking. Screwball comedies gained traction in the 1930s, in the wake of the Great Depression. At a time when audiences were desperate for escape and laughter, filmmakers delivered stories filled with eccentric characters, unlikely romances, and whirlwind misunderstandings. These films often paired strong-willed female leads with befuddled, sometimes bumbling men, flipping traditional gender roles and offering playful critiques of class and society. Classics like It Happened One Night, 1934, Bringing Up Baby, 1938, and His Girl Friday, 1940, featured rapid-fire dialogue, mistaken identities, and comic chaos. These films were not just funny, they were clever. Writers and directors relied on language, timing, and social nuance rather than slapstick alone. At the heart of many screwball comedies was the battle of the sexes, a theme that allowed for both romantic tension and subtle explorations of power, independence, and love. Actresses like Katharine Hepburn, Carole Lombard, and Rosalind Russell brought fierce intelligence and charisma to these roles, challenging the era's expectations of women on screen. Beyond screwball, comedy took other forms too. Marx Brothers' anarchic antics, Charlie Chaplin's Tender Tramp, and W.C. Field's grumpy sarcasm all brought distinctive flavors. Comedy's adaptability made it a cornerstone of the golden age, keeping it fresh and relevant across decades. Historical epics and dramas. Historical epics and dramas represented the grandeur and ambition of Hollywood's golden age. These were the films that sought to impress not only with emotion and story, but with scale, lavish costumes, elaborate sets, massive casts, and sweeping narratives drawn from the pages of history or classical literature. Studios poured enormous resources into these productions, often betting on their prestige and spectacle to attract large audiences. Films like Gone with the Wind, 1939, Ben-Hur, 1959, and Spartacus, 1960, captivated viewers with tales of heroism, tragedy, and moral struggle, all set against the backdrop of war, empire, or revolution. These epics often featured dramatic performances by Hollywood's most bankable stars, including Charlton Heston, Elizabeth Taylor, and Vivien Leigh. Directors like Cecil B. DeMille became synonymous with this genre, crafting biblical and historical dramas with dramatic flair and meticulous detail. Beyond spectacle, these films often carried ideological weight. They explored patriotism, sacrifice, honor, and leadership, qualities that resonated strongly in wartime America and the post-war years. At the same time, they provided escapism, transporting audiences to ancient Rome, the American Civil War, or Napoleonic Europe. Yet, these films were not without criticism. Historical accuracy was frequently sacrificed for drama, and narratives often reflected the biases and cultural assumptions of their time. Despite this, the historical epic stood as a testament to Hollywood's artistic and commercial ambition during its golden years. Horror films and early monsters. In the shadowed corners of the Golden Age lived the monsters. Horror films of this era, while often dismissed as mere genre fare, played a significant role in shaping the cinematic imagination. Rooted in folklore, literature, and psychological fear, these films gave form to society's deepest anxieties about science, the unknown, and the self. Universal Studios was the undisputed king of classic horror, producing an iconic roster of films that remain influential to this day. Dracula, 1931, Frankenstein, 1931, The Mummy, 1932, and The Wolfman, 1941, introduced audiences to unforgettable characters and eerie, gothic atmospheres. These early monsters weren't just villains. They were often tragic figures, misunderstood and alienated. Frankenstein's monster, for instance, was a powerful metaphor for the dangers of unchecked scientific ambition, as well as the pain of being unloved and unwanted. Actors like Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff became genre legends, their portrayals leaving lasting impressions that defined the visual language of horror. Directors like James Whale used shadow, sound, and silence to create dread and suspense in ways that still resonate. Horror also reflected social fears about outsiders, disease, or morality, and offered safe spaces to confront the uncomfortable. These films were often produced on modest budgets, but their emotional and psychological impact was profound. In the Golden Age, horror was not just about scares. It was about storytelling, mood, and confronting the monsters, both real and imagined, that lurk beneath the surface. Romance in Golden Age cinema. Romance was the heartbeat of many Golden Age films, offering stories of love lost, found, challenged, and rekindled. Whether sweeping or subtle, the romance genre brought emotional resonance to the silver screen, captivating audiences with tales of passion, conflict, and fate. Golden Age romances spanned genres, musicals, dramas, comedies, and featured pairings that became legendary. Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca, 1942, Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh in Gone with the Wind, 1939, and Cary Grant with Almost Everyone. These films celebrated love in all its forms: devoted, forbidden, tragic, redemptive. The constraints of the Hays Code meant that love scenes were often more suggestive than explicit, relying on glances, wordplay, and cinematic subtext. This led to an era of deeply romantic storytelling, where longing and restraint made emotions more intense. Romance films also reflected changing social norms. While many adhered to traditional gender roles, others showcased independent women and emotionally complex men, hinting at evolving ideas of love and partnership. Audiences, eager for both fantasy and relatability, responded in kind. At their best, Golden Age romances transcended the screen, becoming part of the cultural conversation. They taught generations how to fall in love, on rooftops, train stations, war-torn cities, and moonlit streets, and left behind a legacy of emotion and artistry. War films and patriotism. In an age defined by global conflict, war films became a vital part of Hollywood's output. These movies did more than entertain. They informed, inspired, and united audiences, reflecting national values and encouraging patriotism during trying times. During World War II, the U.S. government worked closely with studios to produce films that bolstered morale, educated the public, and supported the war effort. Directors like Frank Capra made propaganda films, Why We Fight series, while stars like Jimmy Stewart and Clark Gable joined the military, blurring the lines between Hollywood and national service. Popular war films included Sergeant York, 1941, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, 1944, and Battleground, 1949. These movies highlighted bravery, sacrifice, and camaraderie, often focusing on the experiences of ordinary soldiers. They portrayed war as a noble struggle, while rarely showing its full brutality. Post-war films began to shift tone. While some celebrated victory, others explored the psychological toll of combat. Films like The Best Years of Our Lives, 1946, depicted veterans struggling to adjust to civilian life, adding depth and realism to the genre. War films served as both history and mythology. They shaped how generations understood conflict, heroism, and duty, cementing their role as a defining genre of the Golden Age. Animation's rise. Disney. One of the most revolutionary developments of the Golden Age was the rise of feature-length animation, led by Walt Disney. While short animated cartoons had existed for years, it was Disney who dared to dream bigger, and in 1937, he released Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first full-length animated film. Critics called it Disney's folly, expecting it to fail. Instead, it became a massive hit and a milestone in cinematic history. Disney proved that animation could deliver emotion, artistry, and universal appeal. The 1940s saw the release of more beloved classics: Pinocchio, Fantasia, Bambi, and Dumbo. These films showcased Disney's innovation, blending cutting-edge technology, like the multiplane camera, with timeless storytelling. They dealt with themes of growth, loss, imagination, and perseverance, told through charming characters and unforgettable music. Disney's rise influenced not just animation, but all of filmmaking. His studio emphasized story structure, character development, and emotional arcs, lessons later applied to live-action films. The Disney formula, music, magic, and moral, would shape the future of global entertainment. As animation matured, it gained legitimacy as an art form. It wasn't just for children. It was storytelling at its purest, painted one frame at a time. Genre blending and innovation. While Golden Age Hollywood was known for its clear genre lines, it was also a time of remarkable experimentation. Filmmakers began to blend genres, mixing comedy with mystery, romance with thriller, or musical with drama, to create fresh and compelling experiences. This genre blending expanded storytelling possibilities and allowed for more complex characters and themes. Films like Casablanca combined romance, war, and noir. The Philadelphia Story mixed high society drama with screwball comedy. Rebecca, 1940, was part romance, part gothic mystery. Innovation also came in narrative structure and visual style. Directors pushed the limits of what genres could do, creating works that were bold, poetic, and emotionally led. These films surprised audiences by challenging expectations, and many became classics because of their uniqueness. Genre hybridity reflected the richness of human experience. Life isn't neatly categorized, and neither were the best films of the Golden Age. By daring to mix tones and tropes, filmmakers created a more dynamic and enduring legacy. Legendary actors and actresses. The rise of Humphrey Bogart. In the dim light of the silver screen, few faces have become as enduring as that of Humphrey Bogart. With his cigarette-draped voice and weary eyes, Bogart seemed born for noir shadows and smoky dialogue. Yet his rise to stardom was anything but sudden. Born in 1899 in New York City, Bogart began his career on the stage, then moved to supporting film roles throughout the 1930s. For years, he played gangsters and second-string villains, often overshadowed by bigger stars. But his quiet charisma and undercurrent of vulnerability set him apart, waiting for the right moment. That moment came in 1941 with The Maltese Falcon. As Private Eye Sam Spade, Bogart delivered a performance that was both tough and intelligent, a blueprint for the noir anti-hero. Later that same year, he starred in High Sierra, confirming his transition from supporting player to leading man. Then, in 1942, Casablanca sealed his legacy. As Rick Blaine, the disillusioned nightclub owner torn between love and duty, Bogart gave audiences a hero who was stoic yet soulful. His chemistry with Ingrid Bergman was electric, his lines timeless. "Here's looking at you, kid," became a farewell for the ages. Throughout the 1940s and early 50s, Bogart headlined a series of hits: To Have and Have Not, The Big Sleep, Key Largo, and In a Lonely Place. He often portrayed men hardened by life but softened by love or principle. Even when he played criminals, he did so with complexity and grit. In 1951, he won the Academy Award for The African Queen, where his rugged performance alongside Katharine Hepburn showed his versatility. Despite his fame, Bogart remained deeply private, known for his loyalty to friends and his marriage to actress Lauren Bacall. Humphrey Bogart's legacy lies not just in the roles he played, but in the style he brought to them: world-weary, ironic, deeply human. He wasn't polished or traditionally handsome. He was real. And in being real, he became unforgettable. Audrey Hepburn's early roles. Graceful, elegant, and effortlessly luminous, Audrey Hepburn seemed to glide across the screen like a whisper of stardust. Before she became an icon of style and sophistication, she was a young dancer and wartime survivor whose early roles marked the beginning of a cinematic fairytale. Born in Brussels in 1929, Audrey experienced the hardships of World War II firsthand while living in the Netherlands. She studied ballet, and though her dreams of becoming a prima ballerina were sidelined by malnutrition, her training gave her poise that would define her on-screen presence. Her breakthrough came in 1953 with Roman Holiday, opposite Gregory Peck. As Princess Anne, a royal escaping her duties for one day in Rome, Hepburn was radiant, charming, vulnerable, and fresh. The performance won her an Academy Award and instant stardom. From there, her early roles showcased her unique blend of innocence and strength. In Sabrina, 1954, she played the chauffeur's daughter transformed into a Parisian sophisticate. In Funny Face, 1957, she danced and sang her way into hearts as a bookshop clerk turned fashion model. Even in these formative roles, Hepburn's persona was clear, refined but approachable, elegant but deeply human. She brought warmth to aristocracy and depth to simplicity. Her expressive eyes and delicate mannerisms made her ideal for romantic roles, yet she always seemed to carry a quiet intelligence beneath the surface. Audrey Hepburn's early career built the foundation for her legend. She was more than a pretty face, she was grace incarnate, a new kind of leading lady for a changing world. Her light was soft, but it never dimmed. Marilyn Monroe's impact. Marilyn Monroe was more than a movie star. She was a symbol of beauty, vulnerability, fame, and the loneliness that can live within both. Her impact on Hollywood and the broader culture remains profound, even decades after her untimely death. Born Norma Jean Mortensen in 1926, her early life was marked by instability and foster homes. She began modeling in the 1940s and soon attracted attention from film studios. With platinum blonde hair, a whispery voice, and a smile that seemed lit from within, Monroe quickly became a screen sensation. Her early roles leaned heavily into her sex appeal. In films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, and How to Marry a Millionaire, 1953, she played the dumb blonde with comic flair and surprising self-awareness. She wasn't just playing a part, she was poking fun at the part itself. The 7-Year Itch, 1955, gave us her most iconic image, Marilyn standing over a subway grate as her white dress billowed around her. It was pure cinema magic, playful, provocative, unforgettable. But Monroe yearned for more. She studied acting seriously, seeking to be seen as more than a bombshell. Her performance in Bus Stop, 1956, was raw and nuanced, revealing her depth. In Some Like It Hot, 1959, she combined comedy, music, and heartbreak in a role that remains beloved. Marilyn's off-screen life was marked by struggle, mental health issues, addiction, and troubled relationships. Despite her success, she often felt trapped by her own image. Still, she persisted, fighting for creative control and recognition. Monroe's impact endures because she represented both fantasy and fragility. She was the dream girl who wanted to be understood, the icon who longed to be real. And in that contradiction, she touched something deeply human. Clark Gable and leading men. Clark Gable was the quintessential leading man of Hollywood's golden age. With his square jaw, confident swagger, and commanding screen presence, he became the very image of masculinity and charm in American cinema. Dubbed the King of Hollywood, Gable was more than just a handsome face. He was a symbol of charisma, strength, and resilience. Born in 1901 in Cadiz, Ohio, Gable's early life was anything but glamorous. Raised by a working-class family, he held a variety of jobs before turning to acting. His rugged good looks and deep, resonant voice quickly caught the attention of casting directors. By the early 1930s, he was a star in the making. Gable's breakthrough came in 1931 with A Free Soul, but it was his performance in It Happened One Night, 1934, that catapulted him to superstardom. The romantic comedy, directed by Frank Capra, showcased Gable's charm and comedic timing. His scene removing his shirt to reveal a bare chest caused an actual dip in undershirt sales across America, a testament to his cultural power. Yet, Gable's most iconic role would come in 1939, as Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. His portrayal of the suave, cynical Southern gentleman who falls in love with the fiery Scarlett O'Hara, played by Vivien Leigh, is etched into cinematic history. With the unforgettable line, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," Gable left an indelible mark on generations of filmgoers. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, Gable starred in a string of successful films, including San Francisco, Mutiny on the Bounty, and Boomtown. He often played strong, self-made men, cowboys, soldiers, reporters, embodying the kind of tough but good-hearted hero that audiences admired. Gable's personal life, like many stars of the era, was full of headlines. His marriage to actress Carole Lombard was widely regarded as one of Hollywood's great love stories. Her tragic death in a plane crash in 1942 devastated him and added a layer of quiet sorrow to his public image. Even as Hollywood evolved, Gable remained relevant. His return from military service during World War II only bolstered his image as a real-life hero. He continued acting into the 1950s, culminating in his final film, The Misfits, 1961, alongside Marilyn Monroe. Clark Gable wasn't just a movie star, he was an ideal. For decades, he defined what it meant to be a leading man, blending strength with sensitivity, bravado with vulnerability. In every performance, he brought a grounded, magnetic energy that audiences found irresistible. And through him, the Golden Age found its king. Bette Davis's strong characters. Bette Davis redefined what it meant to be a leading lady in Hollywood's Golden Age. She wasn't the conventional beauty of the time, but what she possessed was far more powerful. An intensity, a sharp intelligence, and an unmatched ability to disappear into her characters. She wasn't content to play arm candy or damsels in distress. Davis demanded roles with complexity and grit. Born Ruth Elizabeth Davis in 1908, she began her acting career on the stage before transitioning to film in the early 1930s. Her early roles often showcased her piercing eyes and expressive features, but it was her performances in films like Of Human Bondage, 1934, and Dangerous, 1935, which won her first Oscar, that put her on the map as a serious dramatic actress. Davis was never afraid to portray flawed, even unlikable women. In Jezebel, 1938, Now, Voyager, 1942, and All About Eve, 1950, she played characters who were manipulative, proud, and emotionally raw. But she also brought vulnerability and depth to these roles, making her characters unforgettable. She fought for better scripts, better roles, and better representation for women in Hollywood. At Warner Brothers, she clashed frequently with executives, eventually suing the studio in the 1930s to gain control over her role selection, a bold and unprecedented move. She lost the case but won public admiration. Davis wasn't just an actress, she was a trailblazer. Her influence paved the way for future generations of actresses to demand stronger, more dynamic roles. Her legacy lives on in the powerful female characters that dominate cinema today. James Stewart's everyman persona. James "Jimmy" Stewart embodied the American everyman. With his lanky frame, soft-spoken voice, and warm sincerity, Stewart portrayed ordinary men thrust into extraordinary situations, characters that audiences could identify with and root for. Born in 1908 in Pennsylvania, Stewart studied architecture before turning to acting. He began working in Hollywood in the mid-1930s and quickly gained a reputation for his earnest performances. His breakout came in Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 1939, in which he played an idealistic young senator who stands against political corruption. Stewart's powerful yet understated performance earned him an Academy Award nomination. During World War II, Stewart put his acting career on hold and joined the U.S. Army Air Forces, eventually flying combat missions in Europe. His service made him a real-life hero, and it deepened the sense of authenticity he brought to his post-war roles. In the 1940s and 50s, Stewart took on more complex characters, working with directors like Alfred Hitchcock in Rear Window and Vertigo, and with Frank Capra again in It's a Wonderful Life. These films showed his range, not just the wholesome everyman but also a man tormented by fear, desire, and doubt. Stewart remained active in film and television into the 1980s. His legacy is one of decency, humility, and quiet strength. He made audiences believe in goodness, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. Judy Garland's musical magic. Judy Garland was a force of nature, a singer, actress, and performer whose raw talent and emotional vulnerability made her a legend. She will forever be remembered for her role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, 1939, where her rendition of Over the Rainbow became one of the most iconic performances in cinematic history. Born Frances Ethel Gum in 1922, Garland began performing as a child with her sisters before signing with MGM. The studio immediately recognized her talent, but also subjected her to extreme pressures to maintain a specific image. Despite the challenges, she became a top star, known for her emotional depth and extraordinary vocal range. In films like Meet Me in St. Louis, 1944, Easter Parade, 1948, and A Star is Born, 1954, Garland blended vulnerability and strength. Her performances often felt deeply personal, as if she was sharing a piece of her soul with the audience. Behind the scenes, Garland struggled with addiction, self-image issues, and the pressures of fame. Her personal battles only made her performances more poignant. Audiences sensed her fragility and responded with unwavering affection. Garland's legacy extends beyond her films. She became a symbol of resilience and passion, inspiring generations of performers. Her voice, her emotion, and her spirit remain unmatched in Hollywood history. The era's child stars. Hollywood's golden age wasn't just built on the shoulders of adult stars. Child actors played a crucial role in shaping the industry's success. These young performers captivated audiences with their innocence, charm, and talent, becoming household names at incredibly young ages. Perhaps the most iconic of them all was Shirley Temple. With her golden curls, dimples, and effervescent spirit, she became America's sweetheart during the 1930s. In films like Bright Eyes, 1934, and Heidi, 1937, Temple sang, danced, and smiled her way into the hearts of millions, providing much-needed cheer during the Great Depression. Other notable child stars included Mickey Rooney, who grew up on screen and became one of the most prolific actors of the era, and Margaret O'Brien, known for her tearful performances in films like Meet Me in St. Louis. The studios tightly controlled the lives of these young stars, often enrolling them in on-set schooling and dictating every aspect of their public image. While many enjoyed long careers, others struggled with the transition into adulthood or faded from the spotlight. Despite the challenges, these child stars contributed immensely to the charm and appeal of Golden Age cinema, and their legacy continues to shape how Hollywood handles young talent today. Romantic chemistry has always been a powerful draw at the movies, and during Hollywood's Golden Age, certain on-screen couples captured the imagination of audiences in ways that still resonate. These pairings brought not just romance, but magic, charisma, and often tension to the screen. Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh, in Gone with the Wind, delivered one of the most passionate and tumultuous relationships in film history. Their dynamic as Rhett and Scarlett is the stuff of legend. Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy were another iconic duo. Over 9 films, they portrayed couples whose sharp wit and mutual respect created an intellectual and emotional chemistry rarely seen. Their real-life romance only added depth to their on-screen connection. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers dazzled with their dancing and undeniable charm. Whether in Top Hat or Swing Time, they floated across the screen, captivating viewers with their grace and elegance. These couples, real or fictional, added layers of intrigue and emotion to their films. Their pairings became a standard for what on-screen romance should feel like, full of spark, conflict, affection, and undeniable connection. While audiences marveled at the performances on screen, life behind the scenes was often a stark contrast to the glamour of Hollywood. The stars of the Golden Age lived under constant scrutiny, both from studio executives and the public eye. Their lives were heavily managed, scripted, and, in many cases, controlled by studio contracts. Studios dictated what stars wore, who they dated, and even when they could marry or divorce. Public image was everything. Scandals were carefully hidden, and fixers were often employed to manage any controversy that might harm a studio's reputation. Many stars lived double lives. Publicly, they were polished and perfect. Privately, they struggled with personal demons, addiction, depression, loneliness. Judy Garland's tragic story is just one of many examples of how fame came at a steep price. Despite the challenges, many stars formed close bonds with each other. Studio backlots became second homes, and friendships, like those between Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, though famously fraught, or Cary Grant and Randolph Scott, offered comfort in an otherwise isolating industry. Understanding the lives of these stars behind the cameras gives us a deeper appreciation for the performances they delivered. They weren't just acting. They were surviving, thriving, and creating in an era of intense pressure and remarkable transformation. Alfred Hitchcock's suspense. Alfred Hitchcock, often called the master of suspense, revolutionized the thriller genre with his meticulous direction and psychological depth. Born in England in 1899, he brought a unique vision to Hollywood, weaving fear and tension into narratives that left audiences spellbound. Hitchcock's hallmark was his ability to make viewers feel uneasy, even when nothing overtly frightening was happening. In films like Rebecca, 1940, Shadow of a Doubt, 1943, and Notorious, 1946, he crafted moments of quiet dread, using lighting, camera angles, and silence as effectively as sound and action. He was a pioneer of visual storytelling. Take, for instance, the way he used subjective camera work to place audiences inside a character's mind. He famously explained suspense by describing a bomb hidden under a table, showing the audience what the characters didn't know, keeping tension high as they waited for the inevitable. Hitchcock also understood the psychology of fear. He played with the idea of voyeurism in Rear Window and used guilt and mistaken identity as recurring themes. His characters were often ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances, an idea that made his films both thrilling and relatable. What made Hitchcock's style enduring was his deep understanding of human emotion. His suspense wasn't just about danger. It was about vulnerability, trust, and the fear of the unknown. Decades later, his influence remains unmistakable across countless thrillers and psychological dramas. John Ford's Western vision. John Ford brought the American West to life on screen, not just as a setting but as a mythic landscape of rugged beauty and complex morality. Born in 1894, Ford directed over 140 films, but it was his work in the Western genre that cemented his legacy. Ford's films weren't just about cowboys and outlaws. They were meditations on justice, civilization, and the cost of progress. In Stagecoach, 1939, My Darling Clementine, 1946, and The Searchers, 1956, he portrayed the West as a place where law and lawlessness collided, where heroism came with deep flaws, and where community had to be earned. His frequent collaboration with actor John Wayne helped define the archetypal American hero, strong, stoic, and principled, but often carrying a troubled past. Ford's westerns were both grand and personal, filled with sweeping landscapes and intimate moral dilemmas. Ford also had an eye for composition. He used Monument Valley's vastness as more than a backdrop. It was a character in itself, reflecting the loneliness and grandeur of frontier life. His visual style, combined with poetic storytelling, created some of cinema's most iconic images. Through his films, Ford helped shape the myth of the American West, blending history and legend in a way that still resonates today. He made the Western genre more than entertainment. He turned it into American folklore. Orson Welles and innovation. Orson Welles burst onto the Hollywood scene like a thunderclap, shaking the foundations of cinema with Citizen Kane, 1941. At just 25 years old, Welles co-wrote, directed, produced, and starred in what many consider the greatest film ever made. But his brilliance didn't end there. It was only the beginning of a lifetime of cinematic innovation. Welles approached filmmaking like a magician, constantly searching for new ways to astonish and engage. He broke the rules of narrative, chronology, and visual perspective. In Citizen Kane, he used deep focus cinematography, non-linear storytelling, and dramatic lighting to create a complex portrait of a man's rise and fall. But Welles's innovation wasn't just technical, it was emotional. He treated film as a medium for introspection and critique. His characters were often haunted by ambition, memory, and loss. In The Magnificent Ambersons, 1942, and Touch of Evil, 1958, he explored themes of decay and moral ambiguity with a painter's touch and a philosopher's depth. Despite clashes with studios and frequent setbacks, Welles remained committed to artistic integrity. He made bold choices, even when they limited his commercial success. His legacy isn't just a list of films, it's a challenge to all filmmakers to think deeper, go further, and dare more. Orson Welles didn't just make movies. He redefined what movies could be. Billy Wilder's wit. Billy Wilder brought a sharp wit and a cynical edge to Hollywood storytelling. With roots in Austrian journalism and screenwriting, Wilder arrived in America with a keen sense of irony and a gift for dialogue that would make him one of the most influential directors of his time. Wilder's films walked the line between comedy and tragedy. In Double Indemnity, 1944, he turned a tale of murder into a riveting noir masterpiece. In Sunset Boulevard, 1950, he dissected the dark side of Hollywood glamour with biting satire. And in Some Like It Hot, 1959, he delivered one of cinema's greatest comedies, all while bending gender norms and censorship rules. His dialogue crackled with intelligence. Characters in Wilder films didn't just talk, they sparred. But beneath the banter was often a profound sadness or critique. His protagonists were frequently flawed, even morally compromised, yet always human. Wilder was also a master of structure. He built his stories with precision, often surprising audiences with twists and reversals that felt both shocking and inevitable. What made Billy Wilder's style so enduring was his refusal to underestimate his audience. He trusted viewers to follow complex plots, appreciate dark humor, and engage with morally gray characters. His films entertained, but they also challenged and provoked. Frank Capra's optimism. In an era of war and economic hardship, Frank Capra gave audiences something they desperately needed: hope. Known for his warm, idealistic films, Capra believed in the basic goodness of ordinary people and the enduring promise of democracy. Capra's most famous films, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, 1936, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 1939, and It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, centered on underdogs. His heroes were honest, humble, and driven by principle, often standing alone against corrupt systems or cynical societies. His visual style was simple and straightforward, allowing characters and emotions to take center stage. Capra's strength lay in his ability to make moral clarity feel uplifting rather than preachy. He knew how to build emotional momentum, leading to climaxes that left audiences inspired and tearful. Though critics sometimes dismissed his work as overly sentimental, Capra's films resonated with millions. They were deeply patriotic, not in a boastful way, but in a quiet belief that America could live up to its ideals. In many ways, Capra was the cinematic voice of hope, a reminder that in times of darkness, kindness and courage could still light the way. Howard Hawks's versatility. Howard Hawks was a director who defied easy categorization. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he didn't confine himself to a single genre. Instead, Hawks made his mark across the cinematic spectrum, from screwball comedies to westerns, from gangster films to war dramas. His hallmark wasn't genre but craftsmanship. What set Hawks apart was his ability to tell a tight, efficient story while giving his characters space to breathe and feel real. His characters were often witty, capable, and cool under pressure. They bantered with style, but underneath the clever lines was a sense of camaraderie, loyalty, and quiet resilience. In Bringing Up Baby, 1938, he helped define screwball comedy with fast-paced dialogue and chaotic charm. In His Girl Friday, 1940, he reimagined a stage play with rapid-fire repartee and strong, independent leads. Then, shifting effortlessly, he gave us the aviation drama Only Angels Have Wings, 1939, and the iconic western Red River, 1948. Hawks's ability to move between genres with confidence spoke to his deep understanding of story and character. He believed in professionalism, both in his crews and in his characters, and his films often celebrated competence and calm under fire. In Hollywood's golden age, Howard Hawks was a quiet force, a man who didn't seek attention but left behind a body of work that shaped modern cinema. George Cukor's romance. George Cukor brought sensitivity and elegance to the screen, especially when it came to romance and character-driven drama. Known as a woman's director, a term he neither claimed nor rejected, Cukor had a gift for drawing extraordinary performances from actresses and telling emotionally resonant stories. In films like The Philadelphia Story, 1940, Gaslight, 1944, and My Fair Lady, 1964, Cukor balanced style with substance. His stories often featured complex female leads, strong, flawed, and compelling. He knew how to create intimate emotional tension, even in grand, polished productions. Cukor was also a visual stylist. He had a flair for lush set designs, graceful camera movement, and subtle performances. But what really made his films stand out was his attention to dialogue and nuance. He didn't need melodrama. He trusted that emotional depth could come through in a glance, a sigh, a quiet pause. Behind the scenes, Cukor was known for being collaborative and meticulous. He worked closely with his actors, building trust and allowing them to explore their characters fully. Stars like Katharine Hepburn, Ingrid Bergman, and Judy Garland flourished under his direction. George Cukor gave romance a voice in classic Hollywood, not as fantasy, but as a study of connection, conflict, and the courage to love. Cecil B. DeMille's spectacles. Cecil B. DeMille was a showman, a master of cinematic spectacle who believed that movies should awe and inspire. With a career that spanned from silent film to post-war epics, DeMille specialized in grandeur, casting history and religion in the brightest, boldest light. He made audiences sit up in their seats with lavish sets, massive crowds, and moral clarity. Films like The Ten Commandments, 1956, Samson and Delilah, 1949, and Cleopatra, 1934, weren't just movies, they were events. DeMille didn't just tell stories, he erected monuments to them. His visual scale was unmatched. He constructed entire cities, parted seas, and brought ancient worlds roaring to life. Yet despite the grandiosity, DeMille always maintained a clear moral framework. His films often explored sin, redemption, and divine justice, using visual extravagance to drive home timeless themes. Behind the scenes, he was a commanding figure. His attention to detail, organization, and flair for publicity made him a Hollywood institution. He understood that cinema was both art and business, and he excelled at both. Cecil B. DeMille believed that audiences wanted to be amazed, and he delivered, again and again, with films that were as enormous in scale as they were enduring in cultural impact. The influence of European directors. Hollywood didn't exist in a vacuum. During the Golden Age, European directors brought a wave of new ideas, styles, and sensibilities that enriched American cinema. Many had fled war and persecution, particularly Jewish filmmakers escaping Nazi Germany, and brought with them a legacy of artistic innovation. Directors like Ernst Lubitsch, Fritz Lang, and Michael Curtiz infused Hollywood with European sophistication, expressionism, and storytelling techniques. Lubitsch, known for his Lubitsch touch, brought wit and charm to romantic comedies like Ninotchka, 1939. Lang introduced noirish tension and stark lighting in films like Fury, 1936. Curtiz helmed Casablanca, 1942, blending old-world melancholy with American hope. These directors brought a different visual language. They played with shadow and light, used symbolism, and often infused their films with philosophical weight. Their influence helped shape the aesthetics of film noir, melodrama, and even musicals. Moreover, they brought a global perspective. Having seen the turmoil of Europe firsthand, they added layers of political and emotional complexity to American stories. Their work resonated deeply during and after World War II, offering both escape and reflection. The infusion of European talent into Hollywood made the Golden Age a truly international achievement, proof that great storytelling transcends borders. Legacy of Golden Age filmmaking. The directors of Hollywood's Golden Age didn't just create movies, they built the foundation of modern cinema. Their influence echoes through the decades, in the structure of stories, the language of the camera, and the ambition of filmmakers worldwide. From Hitchcock's suspense to Capra's optimism, from Ford's landscapes to Wilder's wit, each director left a signature that would inspire generations. Today, when we see a tense thriller, a sweeping epic, or a screwball romance, we're often seeing echoes of the techniques and styles these pioneers perfected. But their legacy isn't only in what they created, it's in what they proved possible. They showed that cinema could be art, business, and a reflection of society all at once. They laid the groundwork for everything from the new Hollywood revolution of the 1970s to today's global blockbusters. Many of their films remain timeless. They are studied, referenced, and loved, not just for nostalgia, but because they still move us. They remind us that great filmmaking is about vision, courage, and connection. The Golden Age directors weren't just craftsmen. They were architects of dreams. And their legacy continues every time the lights go down and a story begins. Introduction of sound, talkies. In the early 20th century, films were silent. They relied on gestures, title cards, and musical accompaniment to convey emotion and dialogue. But everything changed in 1927 with The Jazz Singer, the first feature-length film with synchronized dialogue. Audiences were astonished when Ulf Jolson spoke and sang on screen. It was a seismic moment, one that marked the beginning of the talkies. The introduction of sound didn't just add voices. It transformed the entire language of cinema. Directors now had to rethink how they told stories. Actors had to learn how to deliver lines instead of pantomiming. Cinematographers could no longer move cameras so freely, as early sound equipment was bulky and picked up unwanted noise. Studios scrambled to adapt. Some silent film stars saw their careers vanish overnight due to unsuitable voices or thick accents. At the same time, new stars emerged, those who could not only act but speak with charisma and clarity. Dialogue became a new form of performance, offering more nuance and depth to characters. Sound revolutionized the audience experience. Laughter felt more intimate. Suspense deepened with whispers and footsteps. Songs became storytelling tools. The cinema had found its voice, and it would never be the same. Technicolor and color films. In the early days of cinema, color was a dream. Early experiments involved hand-painting individual frames or using color filters, but these methods were costly and inconsistent. Then came Technicolor, a name that would become synonymous with cinematic magic. The Technicolor process, particularly the three-strip method introduced in the 1930s, allowed for rich, vibrant hues never before seen on screen. Films like The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, and The Wizard of Oz, 1939, showcased the dazzling possibilities of color. Audiences were captivated by emerald cities and ruby slippers, worlds that seemed to leap off the screen. Color added emotional depth and visual storytelling power. A red dress could signal danger or passion. A golden sunrise could reflect hope. Directors and set designers embraced the challenge, carefully choosing palettes to enhance mood and meaning. Technicolor required heavy, complex cameras and bright lighting, which made it expensive. As a result, not all films were shot in color during the Golden Age, but those that became visual landmarks. Eventually, as technology improved and color processes became cheaper, black and white films began to wane. But during the Golden Age, the arrival of color was nothing short of revolutionary. It gave cinema a new dimension. Special effects techniques. Long before the age of digital wizardry, filmmakers found ingenious ways to create magic on screen. Special effects in the Golden Age were often handcrafted, relying on optical illusions, miniatures, matte paintings, and camera tricks. One popular technique was the use of rear projection, where actors would perform in front of a screen projecting background footage, like a speeding car or a cityscape. It wasn't perfect, but it was effective. Matte paintings allowed artists to extend sets and landscapes, seamlessly blending real locations with painted illusions. Practical effects ruled the day. For example, in King Kong, 1933, stop-motion animation brought the giant ape to life frame by frame. It was painstaking work, but it ignited imaginations. Explosions, storms, and supernatural creatures were crafted using miniatures, wires, and smoke machines. Special effects were not just about spectacle, they were about storytelling. They helped audiences believe in the impossible. While today's CGI can render anything imaginable, the effects of the Golden Age carried a tactile charm. They were born from creativity, craftsmanship, and a deep desire to transport viewers to another world. Advancements in cameras. Cinematography took a giant leap during the Golden Age. As cameras evolved, so too did the ways filmmakers could capture and express stories. The cameras of the early 20th century were large and immobile, but technological innovation brought greater flexibility and clarity to the craft. The introduction of lighter cameras and improved film stock allowed for more dynamic movement. Dollies, cranes, and eventually Steadicams opened up new possibilities for tracking shots and sweeping visuals. Directors could now choreograph scenes with greater energy and fluidity. Lenses became more sophisticated as well. Wide-angle lenses allowed for grand compositions. Telephoto lenses enabled intimacy from a distance. Cinematographers began experimenting with depth of field, shadows, and perspective, using the camera not just as a recorder of action but as a painter of light and mood. Black and white film also improved in sensitivity and contrast, leading to the iconic visual styles of noir and melodrama. Each frame became a canvas, meticulously crafted to convey tone and texture. The advancements in cameras turned the lens into a storyteller, one capable of revealing emotion, tension, and beauty in ways that words alone could never express. Lighting innovations. In classic Hollywood, lighting was everything. It was the brushstroke that painted faces, set moods, and directed the viewer's eye. During the Golden Age, lighting design matured into an art form, thanks to both technological improvements and creative experimentation. Three-point lighting became standard. Key light, fill light, and backlight combined to give depth and dimension to actors. This technique sculpted faces, eliminated harsh shadows, and made stars glow with an almost ethereal presence. Glamour lighting for actresses involved soft focus and diffusion, creating a luminous, flattering effect that became iconic. But not all lighting was about beauty. In film noir, low-key lighting was used to create deep shadows and stark contrast. Venetian blinds, fog, and slattered light turned ordinary rooms into places of suspense and danger. Lighting became psychological, illuminating not just faces but emotions. Studios invested heavily in lighting equipment. Massive arc lights, reflectors, and gels gave directors precise control over every beam. Cinematographers became masters of shadow and shine, knowing that even a slight shift in light could change the meaning of a scene. In this era, lighting wasn't just technical, it was poetic. It helped tell stories without a single word. Editing techniques of the time. Editing is often the invisible art of cinema, the pulse that guides the viewer's emotional journey. During the Golden Age, editing transitioned from functional to expressive, shaping the pace, rhythm, and structure of film in exciting new ways. Continuity editing, or the invisible cut, was perfected. Editors made sure shots flowed smoothly, preserving the illusion of real time and space. Match cuts, eyeline matches, and cross-cutting became standard, helping audiences follow complex narratives without confusion. Montage sequences, inspired by Soviet filmmakers like Sergei Eisenstein, found their way into Hollywood films. These rapid edits compressed time, conveyed ideas, and energized story arcs, whether it was a romantic courtship or a soldier's training montage. Sound also changed editing. Synchronizing dialogue, music, and effects added a new layer of complexity. Editors had to be mindful not just of image, but of rhythm and harmony. Musical numbers in musicals required careful timing to match steps, beats, and camera moves. Editing rooms became creative laboratories. Razor blades and celluloid reels flew as editors crafted the heartbeat of the film. They shaped emotion, built suspense, and gave films their distinctive tempo, one cut at a time. Sound design and music scores. Sound in film is more than dialogue. It's atmosphere, emotion, and memory. During Hollywood's Golden Age, sound design and musical scores matured into essential storytelling tools. Sound designers worked behind the scenes, layering ambient noises, footsteps, and effects that brought scenes to life. The creak of a door, the rumble of thunder, the clinking of a glass. These details added texture and realism. Foley artists recreated sounds by hand, often using clever substitutes like coconuts for horse hooves. Music scores, too, became iconic. Composers like Max Steiner, Bernard Herrmann, and Erich Wolfgang Korngold created lush orchestral soundscapes that elevated drama and deepened emotion. Themes became inseparable from characters. Think of the sweeping strings of Gone with the Wind or the ominous notes in Psycho. Studios often employed full-time composers and orchestras. Music wasn't an afterthought. It was part of the script's soul. Leitmotifs were used to signify ideas or characters, giving films a musical language that audiences could feel even if they didn't consciously recognize it. Sound transformed film from a silent shadow play to a symphony of senses. It surrounded, enriched, and expanded the cinematic experience. Introduction of widescreen formats. As television began to rise in popularity during the 1950s, Hollywood needed a new way to draw audiences back into theaters. One of the boldest solutions was the introduction of widescreen formats, a way to make movies bigger, bolder, and more immersive than ever before. CinemaScope and VistaVision were two of the most famous widescreen technologies. They expanded the image, offering panoramic views and a more theatrical experience. The aspect ratio widened dramatically, allowing filmmakers to capture sweeping landscapes, massive crowds, and intricate set designs in a single frame. Widescreen wasn't just about size, it changed storytelling. Directors had to rethink composition. Scenes were no longer vertical or centered but stretched horizontally. This opened up new possibilities for staging, depth, and visual contrast. The widescreen era encouraged epic filmmaking. Think of Ben-Hur Racing Chariots or Lawrence of Arabia Crossing Deserts. These films needed space, and widescreen gave it to them. Widescreen formats were a declaration. Cinema was still grand, still communal, and still capable of transporting you to worlds you could never see on a tiny screen. Early experiments with 3D. Even in the Golden Age, filmmakers dreamed of adding depth to the screen. 3D technology, primitive by today's standards, was an exciting, if fleeting, innovation that promised to make films jump out at the audience. The early 1950s saw a boom in 3D movies. Films like House of Wax, 1953, and Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954, invited viewers to don cardboard glasses and experience a new dimension. Arrows flew toward the screen, monsters reached out, and audiences ducked in their seats. 3D was seen as a response to television's threat. It was a novelty, a spectacle that home screens couldn't replicate. The technology used dual projectors and special lenses to create the illusion of depth, but it was far from perfect. Misalignment, headaches, and technical difficulties made it a short-lived trend. Still, the enthusiasm was real. 3D showed that filmmakers and studios were willing to experiment, to push boundaries, and to imagine new ways of engaging audiences. It planted the seeds for the immersive technologies we see today, from IMAX to virtual reality. Impact on storytelling. Technology does more than enhance images. It transforms how stories are told. Each advancement in sound, color, editing, or cinematography opened new narrative possibilities during the Golden Age. With sound came dialogue-driven scripts and more emotionally nuanced performances. With color came visual symbolism, richer emotional tones, and genre definition. With widescreen, epic tales became more immersive. Even lighting and editing changes allowed filmmakers to build tension, intimacy, and rhythm in ways never before possible. Filmmakers learned to think in terms of what the technology could do. Could a sweeping camera move reflect a character's power? Could shadows reveal hidden fears? Could a soaring musical score say what dialogue could not? Technology didn't replace storytelling, it deepened it. It gave filmmakers tools to speak directly to the audience's senses, to shape how they felt, not just what they saw. In the Golden Age, technological advances and creative imagination walked hand in hand. And together, they turned moving pictures into true cinema. Hollywood's global influence. International film markets. As Hollywood blossomed in the early 20th century, its films began to find eager audiences far beyond American borders. The international film market became not just a secondary stream of revenue, but a vital extension of the American film industry's reach and reputation. In the quiet streets of Paris, in the bustling markets of Mumbai, and even in the flickering cinemas of post-war Tokyo, American films found homes. Their appeal was universal. The drama, the glamour, the action, they transcended language. Subtitles and dubbing would follow, but even silent films spoke volumes to foreign audiences. Hollywood was quick to understand this demand. Studios established distribution branches overseas. Paramount Pictures, for instance, had international offices as early as the 1920s. Films were carefully selected to appeal to different regions, and marketing strategies were tailored accordingly. Stars like Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford became global icons, their faces instantly recognizable on posters from Buenos Aires to Berlin. This global market had a reciprocal effect too. Hollywood began to subtly adapt its storytelling to appeal to a broader audience. Certain themes, like love, adventure, and justice, were universally embraced. Others, more culturally specific, were occasionally softened or reinterpreted for international release. Over time, this international success created a kind of cultural familiarity with America. Viewers across the globe began to imagine life in the US through the lens of Hollywood films. The streets of New York, the deserts of the West, the glitter of Beverly Hills, these became part of a shared visual language. And so, Hollywood's influence continued to stretch like a warm tide, quietly washing up on the shores of every continent, carrying with it stories that not only entertained but shaped perceptions of America itself. Hollywood stars abroad. As Hollywood's films reached international audiences, so too did its stars. These actors and actresses weren't just performers. They were ambassadors of glamour, style, and the American dream. Their names adorned billboards in foreign alphabets, and their faces were lovingly clipped from magazines and pasted on walls from Manila to Madrid. Clark Gable, Audrey Hepburn, Marlon Brando, these names meant something everywhere. Their performances spoke directly to the hearts of viewers, even in countries where English was not widely spoken. For many, seeing a Hollywood star on screen was like meeting a mythic figure, larger than life, yet human. Film premieres abroad were grand affairs. Fans would gather outside embassies or luxury hotels, hoping to catch a glimpse of their favorite stars during promotional tours. The international press eagerly covered their travels, reporting on fashion choices, candid interviews, and off-screen adventures. Some actors embraced their global appeal with open arms. Audrey Hepburn, fluent in several languages, charmed audiences in Europe as naturally as she did in the US. Others, like Marilyn Monroe, became symbols of modernity in post-war cultures eager for renewal. Hollywood stars became mirrors in which the world could see both fantasy and aspiration. They were loved not just for their roles, but for what they represented: a free spirit, a confident smile, the hope of something better. In every corner of the globe, the stardust of Hollywood settled gently, leaving behind dreams that glittered quietly long after the film reels stopped spinning. Exporting American culture. Beneath the celluloid surface of Hollywood films was a powerful current, the steady export of American culture. Through stories, characters, and settings, these films carried with them ideals, values, and lifestyles that subtly promoted a particular way of life. A cowboy defending his land. A family gathered around a dinner table at Thanksgiving. A city teeming with jazz and neon lights. These images painted a picture of America that was captivating to many viewers abroad. They suggested freedom, abundance, innovation, a country alive with opportunity. Hollywood didn't just entertain, it shaped expectations and identities. Young people in Europe or South America might copy the way James Dean walked or Humphrey Bogart smoked a cigarette. Fashion trends, slang, even hairstyles were influenced by what people saw on screen. This cultural influence was not without criticism. Some saw it as a form of soft imperialism, a subtle reshaping of other cultures in America's image. But for others, it was simply part of a global conversation, one in which ideas and dreams flowed freely across borders. Whatever the viewpoint, one thing was clear. When a Hollywood film played in a faraway theater, it didn't just bring a story, it brought America itself, wrapped in sound and color. Collaboration with foreign studios. As Hollywood expanded its global footprint, partnerships with foreign studios became both strategic and creative ventures. These collaborations helped Hollywood access international markets more deeply, and they enriched films with authentic voices and locations. Studios began co-producing films with European and Asian companies, sharing both the financial risks and the artistic rewards. Sometimes this meant shooting on location with local crews. Other times it involved integrating foreign actors or directors into Hollywood productions. This exchange was often mutually beneficial. For instance, post-war Italy offered beautiful landscapes and skilled craftsmen at lower production costs. In return, Italian cinema received a boost in global visibility. Similar arrangements flourished in France, Japan, and later, India and China. These partnerships also paved the way for cross-cultural storytelling. Films began to reflect not just American life, but universal experiences seen through an international lens. Directors like Akira Kurosawa influenced American filmmakers, while European techniques found their way into the Hollywood edit suite. The result was a richer cinematic language, one where borders mattered less and collaboration mattered more. In those quiet backlots and bustling foreign sets, a new kind of global storytelling was born. One where Hollywood led, but didn't walk alone. Impact of World War II on cinema. World War II marked a turning point for Hollywood's global influence. As the world plunged into conflict, cinema became more than entertainment. It became a tool for unity, morale, and even persuasion. Hollywood worked closely with the US government, producing wartime propaganda films that rallied support, explained military campaigns, and humanized the struggles of soldiers and citizens alike. Directors like Frank Capra were commissioned to create series like Why We Fight, which were distributed not just in America but among allied nations. The war also disrupted European film industries. Bombings, censorship, and economic hardship halted production in many countries. Into this void stepped Hollywood, whose films filled theaters across Europe and beyond. American cinema became a lifeline for storytelling, offering both escape and solidarity. Stories of courage, resilience, and justice resonated deeply in war-torn regions. Films like Casablanca carried not just romance but quiet resistance. After the war, Hollywood's presence was even more deeply entrenched. It helped define what victory looked like, and what a post-war world might hope to become. Through both reels and rhetoric, Hollywood played a subtle yet powerful role in shaping the global consciousness during and after World War II, offering hope framed in flickering light. Hollywood's global influence. Film festivals and awards. As the world rebuilt after World War II, a new kind of cultural diplomacy emerged, one that traded tanks and treaties for films and applause. And nowhere was this more evident than in the rise of international film festivals. These elegant gatherings, set in historic cities and grand auditoriums, became the new stages on which Hollywood showcased not only its talent but its global charm. The Cannes Film Festival in France, founded in 1946, was one of the first major festivals to bring together filmmakers from across the world. Hollywood studios eagerly participated, recognizing the value of critical acclaim on an international platform. Films that won awards at Cannes, Venice, or Berlin didn't just bring prestige. They attracted eager distributors and larger audiences abroad. Hollywood stars would travel overseas, dressed in fine gowns and tuxedos, walking red carpets lined with cameras and fans. They became cultural ambassadors, embodying both the glamour of cinema and the spirit of American creativity. These festivals also encouraged collaboration. Directors, producers, and actors from different countries mingled, shared ideas, and laid the foundation for future projects. The language of film transcended borders, creating a sense of global community tied together by reels and dreams. And then there were the awards, the Oscars, of course, being the crown jewel. Though an American institution, the Academy Awards quickly became a symbol of global excellence. International audiences watched with excitement as their favorite Hollywood stars took home statues. And when a foreign film broke into Hollywood's award circles, it was celebrated as a moment of unity, a reminder that great storytelling belonged to the world. In these soft-lit theaters and champagne-soaked after-parties, Hollywood continued to extend its gentle influence, reminding the globe that the silver screen was a place where every story mattered. Influence on world cinema styles. As Hollywood films poured into international markets, they did more than entertain, they inspired. The visual language, pacing, and structure of American movies began to shape how films were made around the world. Directors from Japan, Italy, France, and beyond studied Hollywood's methods. They took notes on how scenes were lit, how dialogue was delivered, how tension was built, and how emotional beats were struck. These lessons became woven into their own cinematic traditions, giving birth to fascinating hybrids of East and West, of classic and modern. In Italy, for example, the neorealism movement developed alongside the influence of Hollywood's storytelling efficiency and star power. While Italian filmmakers focused on gritty realism, their structure often borrowed from the classic American arc of conflict and resolution. Similarly, in Japan, directors like Akira Kurosawa took cues from John Ford's westerns, fusing them with traditional Japanese themes and aesthetics. In some regions, Hollywood's influence was embraced wholeheartedly. In others, it was resisted, but still acknowledged. Even where governments banned American films, underground copies circulated, and young filmmakers watched them in secret, hungry to learn from the masters of cinema. This global interplay didn't diminish local voices, it often strengthened them. By learning from Hollywood's craft, directors around the world found new ways to. Rebecca marked Hitchcock's first American film and won the Academy Award for Best Picture. It tells the story of a shy young woman who marries a wealthy widower and moves to his imposing mansion. There, she finds herself living in the shadow of his late wife, Rebecca, a woman everyone remembers but no one fully understands. Joan Fontaine plays the unnamed heroine with vulnerability and quiet strength, while Laurence Olivier's brooding presence adds a layer of mystery. But it's Judith Anderson's performance as the icy housekeeper Mrs. Danvers that truly chills. Her devotion to the dead Rebecca is unsettling, even obsessive. The film is a masterclass in suspense and atmosphere. Hitchcock fills every scene with unease, mirrors that distort, corridors that echo, eyes that seem to follow. The house itself feels alive, a character woven from fog and memory. Yet at its heart, Rebecca is about identity, insecurity, and the fear of being unworthy. It speaks to anyone who has felt overshadowed by someone else's legacy. And as the flames of the final scene consume the secrets of Manderley, viewers are left pondering the cost of obsession and the power of the unseen. Some like it hot. Now we turn from shadows to laughter, from whispers to wisecracks. Some Like It Hot, released in 1959, is a shining gem of comedy from director Billy Wilder, starring Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon in a riotous tale of disguise, love, and jazz. The film begins with a bang, literally, as two musicians accidentally witness the St. Valentine's Day massacre and must flee the mob. Their solution? Disguise themselves as women and join an all-female band heading to Florida. Hilarity ensues as they struggle to keep their secrets while navigating new friendships and unexpected romances. Marilyn Monroe shines as Sugar Cane, a sweet, dreamy singer with a troubled heart. Her performance in I Wanna Be Loved by You remains unforgettable, a perfect blend of vulnerability and allure. Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis have impeccable comedic timing, with Lemmon's scenes as Daphne offering some of the film's most delightful moments. Behind the jokes, Some Like It Hot gently pushes boundaries. It plays with gender roles and societal norms in ways that were daring for its time. The final line, "Well, nobody's perfect," delivered after a wild reveal, has become one of the most quoted in cinema history. Despite its screwball energy, the film is also tender. It suggests that love and friendship might be found in the most unexpected places, and that laughter can be a refuge in a world that often doesn't make sense. Modern reception of classics. As the years roll by, one might wonder, what do modern audiences think of these old films? After all, tastes change. Technology advances. The world moves faster. Yet these classics continue to draw admiration, curiosity, and even reverence. Why? Perhaps it's because they offer more than nostalgia. They offer craftsmanship. In a time before CGI and green screens, filmmakers had to rely on light, shadow, dialogue, and timing. The results were often poetic. Films that breathed slowly, that gave space for emotion, that trusted the audience to linger in a labor strikes in Hollywood. Behind the glamour of the golden age, a quieter struggle played out, not in front of the camera, but behind it. Technicians, set builders, makeup artists, and editors, all the unseen hands that made movies happen, began to push back against long hours and low wages. As the studio system grew, so too did tensions. The Screen Cartoonists Guild, the Conference of Studio Unions, CSU, and others organized strikes, picketing studio gates under the California sun. One of the most significant was the 1945 CSU strike, which turned violent when locked-out workers clashed with police and studio guards. These weren't glamorous protests. There were no big stars in the picket lines. Just everyday craftsmen and women demanding dignity, safety, and a fair share of the profits they helped create. Eventually, some demands were met. Unions gained ground. Contracts were improved. But the path to fair labor in Hollywood would remain a long one, often marked by silent suffering and quiet victories. These stories remind us that cinema's golden glow was polished by hard-working hands, many of which remained unseen, but not unimportant. Gender roles and representation. The golden age of Hollywood dazzled with its stars, heroes, heroines, lovers, and legends. But behind the silver curtain, gender roles were tightly scripted. Women, though luminous on screen, were often confined to certain parts: damsels, seductresses, mothers, or martyrs. Strong performances came from women like Bette Davis and Katharine Hepburn, but even they faced limitations. Scripts rarely gave women the complexity or autonomy offered to their male counterparts. Female directors were nearly non-existent, and decision-making power rested almost entirely with men. Off-screen, the expectations were just as rigid. Actresses were often judged more on looks than talent, weighed down by contracts that dictated their appearance, behavior, and even whom they could date. Some rebelled quietly. Others walked away entirely. Still, within these constraints, many women carved unforgettable performances. They conveyed strength, sorrow, wit, and fire. But the roles they were allowed to play only hinted at the lives they could have portrayed. It would take decades for the script to truly shift. Yet the silent struggles of these early stars laid the foundation for future generations of women in film, on screen and behind the lens. Racial representation and stereotypes. In the Golden Age, Hollywood painted in broad strokes. And when it came to race, the portraits were often shallow, distorted, and harmful. Non-white characters were few, and when they appeared, they were often reduced to stereotypes, caricatures built from ignorance rather than truth. Black actors were typically cast in servant roles: maids, butlers, porters, rarely central to the story. Asian characters were exoticized or villainized, often played by white actors in yellowface. Native Americans were shown as either noble savages or ruthless enemies. Latino characters were romanticized or ridiculed. Each role, a mirror cracked by prejudice. Yet even within these confines, trailblazers emerged. Hattie McDaniel, the first black actor to win an Oscar, for Gone with the Wind, made history. But her acceptance speech, though gracious, came from a place of quiet pain, grateful for recognition, but yearning for respect. The stories told during this time reflected a narrow view of America. Whole communities were left out or misrepresented. The real rarely showed the real. Today, these portrayals are studied, critiqued, and challenged. And while they remain a part of Hollywood's legacy, so too does the slow, steady push toward more honest, inclusive storytelling. Censorship battles. In the darkened theater, stories flickered to life, but only the ones deemed acceptable. From the 1930s through the 1950s, Hollywood operated under the Hays Code, a strict set of guidelines that controlled what could, and could not, be shown on screen. There were rules about sex, crime, language were manicured, and when scandals arose, as they often did, the studios acted swiftly to suppress them. Affairs, addictions, unwanted pregnancies, and personal tragedies were hidden from view. Press agents spun tales. Doctors were discreet. Gossip columnists were paid or persuaded, all to protect the image, the brand, the illusion of flawless stardom. But some scandals could not be contained. The mysterious death of Thelma Todd, the downfall of Fatty Arbuckle, the troubled life of Judy Garland. These stories offered fleeting glimpses into the pressures of fame, and the heavy cost of being part of the dream machine. For every polished poster, there were sleepless nights. For every red carpet, private despair. The control was nearly total. But cracks appeared, and in those cracks, truths leaked out. Uncomfortable, human, real. The impact of television. As the 1950s dawned, a new glowing screen entered American homes. Television, once a novelty, became a fixture, changing how people consumed stories. And for Hollywood, this posed a challenge unlike any it had faced before. Audiences now had entertainment at their fingertips, without needing to leave the house. Theaters saw a drop in attendance. Studios panicked. Lavish spectacles and widescreen formats were introduced to lure viewers back, but the shift was undeniable. Actors and writers crossed over to television. Some embraced the change. Others resisted. The once clear line between movie stars and TV stars began to blur. Television offered intimacy. News, comedy, drama, all delivered in the comfort of one's living room. Hollywood, accustomed to grandeur, had to adapt to this smaller, more immediate medium. In time, the two worlds learned to coexist. But the arrival of television marked the end of Hollywood's uncontested reign, and the beginning of a more fragmented, diverse landscape of entertainment. Decline of the studio system. For decades, Hollywood's studio system was a fortress, tight, efficient, powerful. Studios controlled everything: the actors, the directors, the sets, the theaters. But no empire lasts forever. And by the 1950s, cracks began to show. Legal battles, especially the 1948 Paramount Decree, forced studios to divest from theaters, breaking their vertical integration. This overnight, but its vibrant colors began to wash into the sepia tones of memory. It was a chapter closing not in anger, but in the natural rhythm of time passing. Changing audience preferences. Audiences once flocked to grand theaters in their Sunday best, eager for stars and spectacle. But as the 1950s moved into the 1960s, those same audiences became restless. They longed for stories that reflected their lives, their struggles, and their evolving world. Younger viewers, especially, craved films that spoke to their generation, raw, real, and rebellious. The polished perfection of classic Hollywood started to feel distant, even artificial. Romanticized portrayals of love, war, and life gave way to ambiguity, moral complexity, and emotional depth. People no longer wanted just escapism. They wanted truth, however messy or uncomfortable. This shift marked a profound transformation in cinema, where the glittering illusions of the golden age gave way to a more grounded, personal form of storytelling. And with that shift, a new era quietly took root. Rise of television. As families settled into their suburban homes, a new glowing screen entered their lives. One that sat in living rooms, not grand theaters. Television arrived like a gentle revolution. It brought entertainment to the heart of the home, freely and frequently. No longer did people need to pay for a night out to see moving images. They could simply gather around the set and tune in. For Hollywood, this was both a challenge and a shock. Audiences dwindled. Box office numbers dipped. Studios scrambled to compete, experimenting with widescreen formats, 3D, and splashier spectacles. But the tide had turned. Television was not just a novelty, it was a new way of life. And though film would continue to evolve, it would now do so with a quiet rival ever present in the background. Breakup of the studio system. In the early days, studios were kingdoms unto themselves, controlling everything from a film's script to the stars who appeared in it, from the cameras rolling to the theaters showing it. But in 1948, a U.S. Supreme Court decision known as the Paramount Decree changed that forever. Studios were ordered to sell off their theater chains, breaking the vertical integration that had kept them so powerful. This legal shift unraveled the tightly woven fabric of the old studio system. Contracts ended. Star power shifted. Creative control became more decentralized. What once felt like a well-oiled machine now became a field of experimentation, risk, and independence. It marked the end of an era, and the beginning of something far less predictable, yet endlessly intriguing. The new Hollywood movement. From the ashes of the old, a new generation of filmmakers emerged, young, bold, and unafraid to challenge the rules. This was the dawn of the new Hollywood era. Directors like Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, and Steven Spielberg brought fresh voices and visions to the screen. Their films reflected the turbulence of the times: war, rebellion, identity, and uncertainty. No longer bound by the rigid codes of the past, they embraced realism, anti-heroes, and unconventional narratives. The studio system, now fragmented, offered more creative freedom. The films were grittier, more daring, and deeply personal. This movement breathed new life into American cinema, but it also reminded audiences of the depth and complexity that film could offer, a legacy ode, in part, to the foundation laid during the Golden Age. Preservation of Golden Age films. Though the lights dimmed on the Golden Age, its stories were not lost. Dedicated archivists, historians, and lovers of cinema worked tirelessly to preserve the celluloid dreams of the past. Films were restored, frames cleaned, and colors corrected. Neglected reels were discovered in vaults and basements, often brittle with time, and lovingly brought back to life. Organizations like the Library of Congress and the American Film Institute recognized the cultural importance of these films, ensuring they would be passed down to future generations. Today, viewers can still watch these classics, thanks to digital restorations, special screenings, and streaming platforms. In preserving these films, we preserve a part of ourselves, our hopes, our fears, our fantasies, and the golden glow of dreams once projected in the dark. Influence on modern filmmakers. Today's directors stand on the shoulders of giants. The shadows and lighting of noir, the sweeping grandeur of musicals, the sharp dialogue of screwball comedies, all echo in modern storytelling. Filmmakers often cite inspirations from the Golden Age. Quentin Tarantino admires the tough swagger of old gangster films. Greta Gerwig channels classic sensibilities in her warm, character-driven stories. Even blockbuster directors, like Christopher Nolan, draw on the technical mastery of Hitchcock and the narrative structure of old epics. The past is not forgotten. It whispers in the language of cinema today. Just as painters study the old masters, directors study the work of Ford, Wilder, Capra, and Cukor. Their techniques, their risks, their triumphs. They continue to shape the stories we tell. Continued popularity of classics. There is something timeless about a black and white romance or a technicolor adventure. Classic films continue to capture hearts, decades after their first release. Perhaps it's the charm of a bygone era, or the comfort of stories with clear arcs and familiar rhythms. Or maybe it's the brilliance of the performances, the way Katharine Hepburn commands a room, or the way James Stewart's voice cracks with sincerity. Modern audiences, young and old, still return to these films. They appear on streaming services, on Turner Classic Movies, in college classrooms, and on rainy Sunday afternoons. They are not relics, but companions, quietly reminding us of the beauty in simplicity, the magic in dialogue, and the joy of well-told tales. Hollywood today, echoes of the past. Hollywood has changed, but traces of the Golden Age remain like footprints in fresh snow. The Oscars still roll out the red carpet. Studios still chase stars. Directors still dream big. And though CGI now dominates many screens, the heart of storytelling beats with the same rhythm as it did in 1939. Remakes abound. Homages flourish. Period dramas recreate the sets and costumes of that glittering era. Even biopics about Golden Age stars surface, reminding viewers of the humans behind the legends. The machinery may have evolved, but the dream factory still hums with old music. Today's Hollywood is a blend, a mosaic of now and then, future and past, illusion and truth. Closing thoughts on a legendary era. The Golden Age of Hollywood may have ended, but it never truly faded. Its legacy is alive in every story that moves us, every line that lingers, every performance that sparks emotion. It was a time of studio grandeur, but also of human brilliance. Writers, directors, actors, and artists shaping a new form of storytelling. In the quiet of night, when an old film flickers on the screen, we are transported, not just to another time, but to a place of shared memory, wonder, and longing. The Golden Age reminds us that cinema is more than entertainment. It is history, culture, and connection. And so, as we turn the page, we do not say goodbye. We simply nod, smile, and press play once more.